Hello and welcome to the World According to Christy podcast. I'm Christy Demetrakis, your host, author of Faith to Conquer Fear, Inspiration to Achieve Your Dreams, and Amazon bestseller, Faith to Conquer Fear, The Journey. As always, I am so glad you are here with me for this episode. It's going to be another great one. But if you've been following me for a bit, you know that I give something a little bit different every week. Some weeks you may hear me pontificating on whatever it is that I find interesting for that week. Other weeks you'll hear recordings from some of my old friends from my vintage Faith to Conquer Fear or Sell Your Message radio shows. And then other weeks you'll hear from some of my new friends. And that is exactly what we are doing this week. So this week I want to introduce you to my special guest, Dr. Jennifer Gardella. And let me read you a little bit about Dr. Gardella. She has a passion for helping small business owners find the time to promote their goods and services for great success. Jennifer has built her career around helping small business owners with social media and digital marketing. She works within client budgets to develop strategic campaigns that are effective. This is very important, people. Jennifer continually reads and researches in the area of social and digital marketing and shares her information with clients and organizations so small business owners can achieve success. Jennifer, welcome to the World According to Christy podcast.
Oh, Christy, I am so honored to be here.
I am so glad you're here, and you're already laughing.
I feel like, because you're like my, more mature sister, like someone I want to be when I grow up. I'm like, why does she want to interview me? My podcast is called Hot Mess to Great Success, so.
But that's such a cool name. Like, that's such a cool name. And I just decided to be vain and go the World According to Christy, because then I can talk about whatever I want to talk about. Leaves the door wide open. Just leaves the door wide open. So, Jennifer, before we get started, because we're going to have a great conversation today, guys, and for those of you who just listened to the bio, her bio is great, but that is not what we're talking about today. Jennifer and I have really turned into what I would call really good friends. We've known each other for several years. She was a guest previously on I don't know if it was my Sell Your Message radio show or the Faith to Conquer Fear radio show. I'm not sure which one it was, but she was actually a guest on my show many years ago. Many years ago.
From the parking lot of Rutgers University, I did that interview.
That's right. I remember that.
I got stuck at a swim meet.
You did. I do remember that. So we have some history, and all of a sudden our paths just crossed again, which we'll talk about a little bit during our time together as well. But Jennifer, before we get started, I'm learning you, and I know a lot about you, but tell folks a little bit about you.
Well, I really thought about this question and the audience that I'm speaking to. And I have to say, Christy, that one of the things that you've really taught me is that, number one, I am a daughter of God and this universe that we live in, this higher power and this universal energy. I'm also a mom of 3 insane, but absolutely fabulous daughter. I don't know where they get their insanity from, possibly from me. So they are 18, 20, and 23, graduated from college, 2 in, and I'm an entrepreneur. Those are the 3 real defining characteristics that, I would use right off the bat. We could dig deeper. Everyone always knows I went to Fordham, I have a PhD, I do all these nutty things. But yeah, those are the 3 big ones.
Well, those are important ones. And I always ask that question very broadly because it's just like in an interview. You've interviewed people, I'm sure. I do a lot of interviewing at Procter & Gamble. And when you leave, you ask that question, tell me about yourself. It just leaves the door open. You find out a whole lot about what's important to people when you say, tell me about yourself. So good. Now that we know that your family is important to you, that's a really good thing.
Good thing that they're out of the house still.
Yeah, but I agree. My 2 are out as well. It's a good thing. This empty nesting thing, yeah, buddy, it's the life we should all aspire to.
Right.
Oh gosh. Well, let's talk about how you and I came to be. I told them a little bit about our first connection, but we've connected much more closely in call it the last year, really.
Yeah, so I can trace it. So I don't remember how I found you the first time.
I don't either.
Yeah, that was like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
But I stayed on your email list, and you're actually one of the few, I have to admit, I didn't read your emails ever, but I stayed on your list. I didn't delete you, which is a huge, like that in and of itself is a huge
Yeah.
thing. And
Yeah.
you sent out an email, and it must have been the subject line, well done digital marketing wise, where you were doing your Faith to Conquer Fear program. And we had a conversation about it, and I'll be very honest, the price point was great. And I was really searching for a deeper spiritual connection. And I thought, well, I completely trust Christy, so let me give this a try. I was church shopping and Bible reading and all of these things, but I didn't have a guide. And so I said, well, I wonder what she's got to say. So it kind of worked out well. And, you know, as I was very honest with the group, there were a lot of people that know the Bible chapter and verse. I do not. I was raised Catholic. We don't do that. I'm now a recovering Catholic, so we don't.
That's my favorite term. Hold on, just pause for a moment, because you always said that I'm a recovering Catholic, and I just thought that was the most hilarious thing ever. But go on, continue.
Yeah. So I love the Catholic Church and the pomp and circumstance and ritual it gave to me, and the importance of family. And my family and I did have some hysterical moments in church, and lots has happened there. And youth group, very important. Didn't work for me in the end. But when you look back and you say, okay, well, they excluded this group and this group, they weren't really kind to these people, and they have all this money, you know, you're like, well, how much of that black and white did I really have a choice to believe? Anyway, all of that. And so nothing really fit for me until I really started to talk to you. And it was that deeper faith in God, and where the Bible can open up different lines of thinking for you and always hit you where you're at, right? I mean, that's one of the beauties of the Bible. You open up one of those pages, especially in the New Testament, and it is going to speak to you with what you need to see that day or hear that day.
That's so true.
And that belief. And as I used to joke when we used to meet every week in your group, you are one awesome prayer. Like, I was like, gosh, don't ask me to pray. Don't ask me to pray. Like, I can't do what Christy did.
And I would ask you too. I
know. And I'd start off with, please, God, let me pray as well as Christy does with the group every week. I don't know what I'm doing. We don't do this.
It doesn't matter though. You grew so much in that program. And we're talking about my Faith to Conquer Fear Inner Circle 90-day program. That's what we're talking about. But you grew so much in that program, and you were so committed. And that's the key. I mean, you knew what you didn't know, and you were willing to have an open mind, an open spirit, an open heart to learn. And we're all learning. That's the key, right? We're all learning. So, you know, I learned as much from you all as you learned from me, apparently. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. So coming out of that time, because obviously we spend every week together for 90 days, you tend to learn people. And we got very, very comfortable with each other. Yeah. And to the point where I would firmly believe, and I say that for you as well as the other people who were a part of the program, but I always am honored and humbled when people feel like I am a safe space for them.
That is a great way to describe you.
And because, it's funny when I'm talking to people, whether it's people who sign up for my strategy sessions or whatever, just interested, just want to have a conversation. They're always amazed, like, I've never told anybody that before, or I can't believe, and it's not, and they go, how did you get me to say that? I didn't get you to say anything. I just tend to draw it out of people. I don't know what happens, but my whole intent, and we're not talking about this program tonight, guys, that's not what we're talking about, but my whole intent with that program, and whether I do it in person, because I've done it with Bible study groups, women's group, churches groups, and of course now virtual, is I want to create a safe space for people, because when you start to talk about faith, confidence, fears, those are not topics that people just wear on their shirt. I have a fear of rejection. I have a fear of change. Nobody wants to talk about that out loud.
Right. I have anxiety. What do I do?
Right. Let's just put that on the t-shirt. Let's just talk about it. But people need that safe space where they can have those open discussions, and they know no judgment.
Right.
We all have hang-ups of some kind. I call them hang-ups because they are. If they keep you from doing X, Y, or Z, it's a hang-up. Might be temporary, but it's still a hang-up. And so, yeah, I love that we were able to create that environment where we feel safe with each other and we could have those very candid conversations, because sometimes I was talking to you like, okay, can we just switch roles for a minute? I need a safe space. Can I talk to you about this?
Yeah.
But coming out of that relationship, you sent me a text. You sent me a text, so nobody's surprised. We are in the midst of racial Hades.
It was
right
May.
now.
It was just a couple months ago.
It was just a couple of months ago. Yep. And, this was before, was this before George Floyd, or was it right after?
No, it must have been after.
I think
it was
after.
when everything was boiling over.
Truly boiling over, yes. And all of a sudden, I got a text from Miss Jennifer. And do you remember what the text said, Jennifer?
Something like, help me. I didn't prepare that way for this call. Go ahead. What did it say?
I don't remember exactly. I was hoping you remembered exactly what it said. But in essence, look, pull that up while we're talking.
I'll see if I have.
But in essence, she said, oh gosh, I need to remember. We need to find it. Seriously.
I don't have it.
You don't have
it.
Oh my gosh.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So I'll tell the backstory of how we got it.
Yeah. And we'll get to the middle of it.
So because I am nothing but an open book and completely vulnerable, and most importantly, I think always willing to learn, and where have I gone wrong? I was in, and I still am in a program with a woman that I really respect, who is African-American, and George Floyd and the race relations was exploding. And she posted something on Facebook. I don't remember what it was, but I responded and I said, now I will share, I grew up in quite the racist household. And I shared on that post in that private group, I've been trying to break the cycle of racism. I raised my children to not see color.
Ah, yes. Not see color.
As Christy will tell you, oh wait, this is Christy's podcast. I can't curse. Christy will tell you,
no,
I got bombarded with how wrong I was as a parent. Now, I can tell you that there are a lot of things that you can call me out on. If you call me out on not parenting the right way, I am going to question and pepper you until I set you straight that I'm perfect. And so I kind of engaged in this conversation with someone that I actually have a lot of respect for. And what came out of it was, okay, you did that, which you thought was a big move, Jen. And that was literally the verbiage that was coming out of our elementary school, which was integrated. So I wasn't just like flapping in the wind here on myself. I was getting some, I thought, good advice, but it was brought to my attention that I should have raised my children not to see color, to celebrate color. So I then go and talk to my daughter, Victoria, who is at the University of Pittsburgh, majoring in becoming the president of the United States. And I said, hey, I raised you to not see color, like everyone's equal. She goes, yeah, you did that wrong. And then she's incredibly liberal and tells me I'm wrong all the time. And she said, you did that wrong. You were supposed to raise us to celebrate color. And I'm like, wait, this is fundamental to who I am as a mom. We're all accepting. We are not who raised me. And so the only thing that I could do at this point was to call you.
And you put it out there so nicely. I mean, I think this was early in the morning. And you said, African-American friend of mine, I used exactly what you explained. And you said, am I wrong? Or is she right? And I said, no, you're wrong. She's exactly right. You absolutely are wrong in this scenario.
Everyone now should realize how much respect I had for Christy that I'm never even talking to her again. Like, this doesn't go well in most circles of mine.
I had no problem typing that back to you. No problem whatsoever.
But then you did, we got on the phone and talked it out too. As two very intelligent women from, let's face it, two different races. And I said, the end of that conversation, and it happened on text and in our call, was we've got to get on air and talk about this, because we can do it in such a respectful way that says, hey, wait a minute. One thing you said to me, Christy, was, I get that you want to break the cycle of how you were raised. Like, you acknowledge that I had at least tried.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
that meant the world to me, because at that point, I really felt like I had totally messed up.
So let's talk about how you were raised for just a little bit, since you brought it up.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, let's talk about that. When you say you were raised racist.
Yeah, so there was not a lot of respect for non-white people. I can't say necessarily from my parents, but I would generalize that to the greater family. And my neighborhood where I lived in my community. That realtor had no right to show that Black family that house in our neighborhood. So this was back in the 70s, I'm going to say. And, I'm sitting there going, why not if they can afford it? Keeping my mouth very shut, by the way.
Oh, of course you were.
Because, I was already standing out as the black sheep, as you can imagine. So any rocking of the boat would not be great. But yeah, so if they can afford it, and wouldn't you know it, that African-American family out in a year, no one talked to them. And then you take it up another generation. So that was the community where I was living in my neighborhood. But then you take it up another generation, and there was an inherent fear. My grandmother had grown up on the streets of New York, had witnessed some pretty nasty things, and attached that to Black people.
Okay.
And so I often try to say in these conversations, she didn't graduate from 6th grade. We're talking no education. So how in the heck could we have ever expected her to grow beyond herself and how she was raised? Because she wasn't given any support or construct or guidance to do that. Kept in those closed communities, and that was just all she knew. So that's why we're here.
So what do you say about people who did graduate from the 6th grade? We have very educated people who are very racist, and they have the ability to know better, right? So I'm going to ask you that question first, and then I'm going to ask you, what was the thing that shifted it for you? So let's answer the first question first.
So one thing that I have learned during my journey, especially these last few months, is when people judge you, treat you unfairly, or treat you differently, it has nothing to do with you as a person. It has to do with an internal system of them of making you feel less than so that they feel more than. And they are highly, I don't want to use the word damaged. They are really suffering themselves on the inside, where they need to look at you and say, you're less than me. And so that's really what I think a lot of it comes down to, because I personally cannot imagine looking at another human being and thinking you're less than me in any way. Your education level, your race, your gender, your religion. And so I really feel like it's someone projecting, and I did do a lot of work last year with a therapist who finally got me to realize anything that anybody says about you has nothing to do with you. And so I do generalize that, and people have to attach themselves to groups, right? We want community in the world.
Yes, that's
Not
true.
too much community right now. We
Not
want to be
too
on
much.
Zoom community, but we want a community. So if your community is holding up the sign that says we're racist, it's really hard. If you're already suffering, it's easy to attach so that you feel connected rather than go find your own people.
So how did you break, in the moment while you were growing up in this household, because you had a choice, right? Everything is a choice. You can choose to be racist. You can choose to be not racist and anti-racist. Two different things, we know. So you grew up in this household, and what was the thing that made you go, okay, this is not right. and I need to do something different?
It was definitely the comment about the realtor, but then I will share
Mhm.
this. I can tell you the moment where it really shifted for me. I went to Fordham University, and you get there as a freshman and you're unpacking your dorm and you're meeting the people on either side of you. And my
Mhm.
friend Kate, and now I have to share this podcast with Kate when it comes out, grew up in Washington, D.C. in a very wealthy family, went to a very posh little high school, private high school. She, we all put out our prom pictures. Isn't this awesome? And she had gone to prom with an African-American boy.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking in my head, oh my gosh, I can't believe she was allowed to do that.
Mm. Allowed to do that. I love that.
That was mind blowing to me. And that's when the shift occurred. It's okay. Now, it really wasn't okay in my life. Let's just be clear.
Right.
It would have not been okay.
Not allowed. Not
allowed.
Mhm.
But that made a profound shift. And we were at Fordham University, right? So very Catholic, well, Jesuit actually, traditional college, a whole bunch of white Irish guys running around drunk. Like that's who's filled at Fordham, right? I loved my school. Don't get me wrong. I make fun of it often. And here was Kate from DC.
Yeah.
And that was pivotal to me seeing that picture. And then one of my other roommates started dating a guy on the basketball team. So you talk about stereotypical.
Yeah.
Right?
All of that, yes.
Yep. So there's some non-white kids on the basketball team.
Just a few typically.
Mike was one of the white ones, by the way. So all of a sudden we started hanging out with all these not white people. And I was like, well, they're at Fordham too. And so this was mind exploding for me. And then I got into the family, my original in-laws, who taught me some very unkind words. And after I mean, literally, I would sit at the dining room table like, holy cow, what does that mean? Right? I mean, these were bad. And I can remember I finally had to say when my daughter was born, no more. This will not be in her life.
And how did they respond to that?
Not well.
I'm sure.
Because especially I had written a letter and I said, I can't judge what you think. I wish I had the letter. I can't judge what you think, but I don't want my child raised in this world. And I had my husband deliver it to his parents. So I'm not like all that and, the torch. Let's go fight the good fight. I'm like, okay, here, you go tell your parents they're not going to see their grandchild. And it did make a huge difference in the way that I don't really believe I changed them. Now, they were highly educated. You talk about, from my grandmother to now these people, they were those highly educated. And I did judge them for that. I don't want them around my child. And I felt like as a parent, I had the right at that point to say no. This will not be in their lives. And now as my father has gone off, he's a professor in New York City, our lives have become much more integrated, I think, which has been wonderful. Still a tremendous amount of work to be done.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, we moved to Pennsylvania a couple years ago, and I remember walking my daughter around in her new high school. And we had already made the decision to move. The house was being sold or rented. My ex-husband was moving. Everything was good. And I realized that we were leaving a very integrated community in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, and coming over to Bucks County. And my daughter looked at me and said, Mom, where's all the black kids?
Where's all the black people?
And I was like, I don't really think there are any here. And you know what? There aren't. There has perpetually been one girl on the cheer team who's black every year. But wow. And that's like the only one. And I'm like, wow, just communities that are completely cut off from.
And what would your kids say the one black girl's experience was? Did you ever talk about it?
No, because I loved the mom. And we were pretty honest with each other. And both families that I knew the older one first because Steffi was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And we got along really well because she was the nicest person I was the new chick in town and at the high school and on the cheerleading team. And these are cliquey moms.
Oh,
and she came right over to me. Hey, I'm Nikki and blah, blah, blah. And this is how you find your way around. And everyone's crazy. I'm like, well, they're cheer moms. Of course they're crazy. Very wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So they could fit in a little bit better, I think.
Mm.
And so they're
at least externally.
Yeah. Right. And they were really, really good from what I could see of giving their children that cultural experience of communities for them because of their skin color. So you would know them better than I mean, Nikki is in a sorority that continues that my friend Erica is in as well. They had the kids they had her daughter go through almost like a debutante process, but within this community of women, it was unbelievable. So they still maintained a lot of it, but within the Bucks County model of huge house and 10 bedroom, that whole thing.
Yeah.
Very
it's very interesting because I remember when we moved to Northern Kentucky. And when you say Northern Kentucky, there's pockets, right? So the town that we are in, so if you look at Northern Kentucky, that is right on just across the river from Cincinnati, there's a lot more diversity. Okay. The further you come out, less. So now you're talking more suburbs, if that makes sense. And so when we relocated with my company, and we always look for school district scores first. So we've moved a lot. So we always look for the best school districts because our mentality as parents is you get one shot. You got one shot to do as best as you can by these children, right? So we're gonna make sure they get the best education, all the things that we can influence. That's what we did. And so typically the best education are in predominantly white neighborhoods. And I remember looking at the census statistics. I literally pulled it up for our little city, and it said four Black people. Four. Not 40, not 40%, 4. And I said, surely this is not right.
Right.
Well, we got here, and it was right. So we doubled the diversity. We literally doubled the diversity in this area. And for the longest time, we never saw anybody that truly looked like us. And so as we're thinking about our children were, again, in the great school system, but there weren't a whole lot of options if we talked about dating. Right. Now, fortunately, when we first got here, our kids were in elementary and middle school, so we weren't dating. But the numbers weren't growing at the rate that my daughter really had options. If she wanted to date a Black guy, my son didn't have a whole lot of options if he wanted to date a Black girl. And as a Black mom, the question I always ask, and my daughter ended up really not dating anybody in high school, so we didn't have to worry about it. But my son did. And the first question is always, is she white or Black? Right? Because there weren't a whole lot of Black girls. There were a lot of mixed girls, but no, not just, is she white or Black? Because that's just the question, because the odds are she was going to be white just because of the population and the demographics of the area. And I remember one time specifically this was actually in college. So shift from high school to college. And my son was interested in a girl who was white, which was fine from our perspective, not a big deal. But my question was, because she took him home and met his grandparents and whatever. And my first question was how did she treat you? How did they treat you? Because it's one thing for the girl to like you, but you learn a lot about the history, to your point, in your family once the parents get a little taste of it, which is why I was asking the perspective. And that's the stuff that, unless you are African American or Black, those are the things that you don't think about as a white person, because you don't have to.
Well, And let's just fast forward to what we've experienced these last 3 months. And you and my friend Kathy and my friend Erica have shared with me what it's like when your sons or daughters, I guess, but sons are out there in the world.
Oh my gosh.
I almost, as if it was bad enough that I didn't know what Juneteenth was. I mean, that's how honest I am. And let me tell you, I have a lot of education behind me. I've never heard of that before this year. I was floored, and just my heart broke as a mom. I mean, we worry enough about our kids. Our kids are crazy, right? Raising children out there, there's enough to worry about.
In and of itself, yep.
But to have that extra layer, it literally broke my heart that you have to worry about that simply because of your child's skin color. They can be out with my kids and be treated completely differently because of their skin color.
Absolutely. You know, we at Procter & Gamble, when all of this was happening, and I have to commend us as a company for the things that have been put in place, right? I have never been more proud to work for a company than I have been with P&G. But we were having, my smaller sub-team was having great dialogue about this thing. And I remember we were having a conversation, this was before the great dialogue. We were having a conversation when all of the riots were happening in Louisville. My kids are in Louisville, my son's in Louisville. And all of this stuff was happening. And the night before, there had been a lot of riots in Louisville. I wasn't aware. But we're on the call this next morning, and one of my coworkers said, hey, what do you think about the stuff going on in Louisville? And I said, I actually hadn't heard anything. Like, what's happening? She's like, well, there's riots. I can't believe you don't know with your kids down there, right? And I said, well, I just kind of missed it. She says, well, if I can't imagine, like, if I had a kid there, I would be much more on top of things, in essence. She said it a little bit more differently than that. But in the moment, I was kind of shocked, like, did she just call me a bad parent? What just happened here? Right? What just happened? And so I let it go in the moment, because I was like, okay, my first response is probably not going to be good. So let me just let that go. And then we ended up having a smaller team discussion about race relations dialogue, all this good stuff. And so they wanted me to talk because there's only 2 Black people on the team. I'm like, well, you get what you get. So I proceeded to have this conversation. I'm trying to explain to them, I'm explaining to them just the microaggressions and the big aggressions that have happened to me. And, you know, a lot of people think things happen to people who are drug dealers and, you know, all this, like, oh yeah, I'm sure it did happen to them because they look a certain way. Well, we don't look a certain way, whatever the certain way is. So when you're able to tell those stories to people, like, this actually happened to me, we work next to each other. Are you surprised? Yeah, they were very surprised. But then I brought back up her comment. And I said, you know, when you mentioned that, I said, in your mind, because what she said was, I can't believe you didn't go down to Louisville and bring your son home. That was her response. And I said, white privilege, because what you don't understand, which we're going to talk about in a second, what you don't understand is, if I did that every time there was a potential threat to my child, I would, first of all, not have a job. Second of all, I can't do it because there's always a threat. And guess what? Oh, by the way, I can bring him home and he can drive up the street and the same thing happens. There is no specific place where it happens. It can happen anywhere. So the fact that you are alluding to me, or alluding to the fact that I'm a terrible parent because I didn't go take my son out of a school because of things that are going on in and around, that can happen to him anywhere. Oh, by the way, that's the problem, not the fact that I didn't go pick him up. Let's just scope this up for a moment. I'm sorry, I got passionate. But, you know, your perspective is wrong. And for you, that might have been the option. But for me, that's not an option. Every Black parent, do you not think we want to go and get our kids and hold them and cuddle them like we did when they were really when they were babies, and we can protect them? They grow up. And all we can do is pray over them, pray that the things that we have taught them are good, and that they are smart enough to keep themselves out of situations where they can control things, knowing that that still doesn't always solve it.
Yeah.
Right? Let's talk about white privilege. What do you think about it?
You're looking at it. And I don't believe that it ever truly hit me until this past, coronavirus and, and everything else that's happened, where I've realized how easy my life has been. If you took someone that was raised just like me, but Black, how much easier the world is for someone like me.
Yeah.
To get services, to get the contacts that I have, just in the upbringing, the education that I had growing up, K-12, Fordham, Rutgers, those were not opportunities. I don't believe that would have been easily, if you were growing up, you wouldn't have grown up next to me because they would have kicked you out of the neighborhood, but we already went through that.
Right.
But yeah, and to realize, like you talk about my daughter and I, Vicki, we had a lot of talks this summer because we were together because she couldn't go back to school yet, about what microaggression looks like, and the only thing that I can do, as she's calling me a racist, basically is say, apologize in my heart to all the people that I might have microaggressioned against. I don't even think that's a word.
We get your point. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to be able to say, like, yeah, I do sit with white privilege. Now, I don't really think it should be held against me. I mean, just like it shouldn't be held against, your race. We do walk that fine line, right? Of,
there is a fine line.
Affirmative action and all of those things. Like, how does all of that balance out so that we're all truly equal? And we've got we keep saying, we got a lot of work to do.
We do have a lot of work to do. So,
oh wait, I have one more thing to say though. This is
please.
So fascinating because my friend Kathy Wilson said this to me, which just floored me. I talk about white privilege. My people came from hope of literally coming over on, and my ex-husband's family coming over on the Mayflower. We're talking daughters of the American Revolution. There's nothing but this big land for you where you can, the big American dream and hope and all this stuff. And your ancestors, Christy, came from slaves.
Yeah.
That was a big revelation this summer.
Not a choice.
Without
not
that,
a choice.
And I'm sure you have a lot of hopeful people in your family. I'm not saying you're all walking around like, oh, woe is us. But to have that, I think Kathy said the ancestral tie or lineage to how I was raised versus how you were, just with that energy. Holy cow. You talk about white privilege. That one knocked me. And again, apologize for never realizing that one before because that was huge.
Yeah, and that's the thing. As I've had lots of conversations with my non-Black friends, I will call, they're all, hey, Christy, we're praying. We don't really know what to say, but blah blah blah. And I always say I appreciate your prayers, but I appreciate more your action. So we talked about racism, racist versus anti-racist. And I need you speaking out. That's what I tell people. It's okay. I get it that you don't feel that way, but the people around you do feel that way. And if you don't feel that way, you have an opportunity to influence. Because they're not going to keep listening to me because I sound like the angry Black woman. Or, my husband who might be the angry Black man, right? Because that's a quick label that we get. That's a very quick label. But I need you to be anti-racist, meaning when we're in your places, your spheres of influence, you are the people typically who are in those high positions, those political offices, those places where decisions are made that are systemic. That's what needs to happen is systemic changes, not just, oh, let me just do this. Oh, no, we got to have systemic change, and it's going to take all of us to do that, but especially our non-Black friends. And so that's what I have encouraged each and every person. They sent me an email. I was like, great, I appreciate your prayers. However, here's what I need you to do. Right?
Well, and you and I talked, and I'm like, okay, what can I do? And you and I were like, let's get you on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm
Yeah, so
actually
I have
willing
no
to
comment.
say, I've got a problem and I didn't know what Juneteenth was, that's something I think that's valid. And, you know, someone called me out and she helped me and I came to you in a incredibly respectful, like, help me get this right. I think that's
Yeah.
the conversation that has to happen.
Yeah.
Is that open dialogue of two pretty amazing women here, right?
Agree
Who really
completely.
respect each other completely.
Yes,
But,
absolutely.
and being able to say, okay, Jen, you're dropping the ball. You say it a lot nicer. Well, actually you didn't. You told me I was wrong.
Yeah.
And then just be able to not correct the behavior, but hey, think about it this way and move forward. And then if you're willing to talk about it, we need to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because that's
Yeah.
how the change is really going to happen.
That is how it happens. It has to start with the conversations, and then leading to action.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Conversation and then as much action as possible.
You got it. Well, I knew this was going to be a great conversation. We could talk for another 3 hours, people. We could, but we are wrapping this up. Jennifer, I am so thankful, first of all, for having you as a friend. And I do sincerely call you my friend. And there are not a lot of people that I call friend. I have lots of associates. I have lots of associates, but I truly do call you friend. And I thank you for your willingness, your transparency. You offered this up. So I love your willingness to truly put yourself out there and just help with the dialogue and for us to show how it can be done, and you're right, we're two very amazing women, if we do say so ourselves. And we're raising some pretty amazing kids, you know, all that good stuff. So again, thank you so much for being a part of the World According to Christy podcast.
Well, thank you for having me on. Always a joy.
All right. And thank you all for listening. I hope that you will subscribe to the World According to Christy podcast so that you can keep up to date on every episode. I have new episodes every week. I am doing what I love, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Bye-bye.